Welcome to episode 1 of a new series, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata. Prologue. In this series, I outline the epic of the Mahabharata, the events that happened before and after the Bhagavad Gita. For those who have not watched my Bhagavad Gita series, I will include links in the description below and tags above. For this series, I have drawn inspiration from the works of Sudipta Bhavik and Avi Ziv in their series, Stories of the Mahabharata, as well as the illustrated Mahabharata by Manoj Publications. I will include links to both resources in the description below. Chapter 1. The King. The story of the Mahabharata begins with a king named Shantanu. One day, the king was in the forest walking near the river Ganga when he saw a beautiful woman walk out of the water. The king was mesmerized and instantly fell deep in love with the mysterious woman. The king inquired as to the woman's identity. "Why do you want to know?" asked the woman. "I am the king of Hastinapur," said Shantanu, "and I have fallen madly in love with you and wish to marry you." "I will accept your proposal, dear king, but only if you accept my 2 conditions," said the mysterious woman. The king was entranced. "Name your conditions, dear lady, and I will gladly accept them." "The first condition is, never ask who I am or where I come from. The second condition, you may observe my actions, but you shall never intervene. The day you break any of these 2 conditions, I will leave you," said the woman. The king was stunned by these requests, but his mind was overtaken with desire, and he readily agreed. The king and the woman returned to the palace and were married. Chapter 2. The Queen. After some time, the queen gave birth to a son. The king was overjoyed at the news. He rushed to the chamber to greet the queen. However, he was confused when he saw her carry the baby towards the river. When the queen got to the river, she put the baby into the water and watched it wash away in the current. The king was horrified. He wanted to shout out, but he remembered his promise to the queen, to only observe but never intervene in any of her actions. He was dumbfounded. The queen returned to the palace, and life went on. Some time later, the queen gave birth to a second son. The king had forgotten the tragedy of the first son, and was again overjoyed at the birth of his new son. But again, as he went to her chambers, he saw the queen carry the child towards the river, set it down in the water, and let it wash away. Again the king was horrified and heartbroken, but again he could say or do nothing due to his promise. This continued for a further 5 times over the years. Each time a son was born, the queen carried the child to the river and let the baby be washed away by the current. Finally, an 8th son was born. Once again, the queen carried the son towards the river, but this time the king could stand it no longer. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop! I won't let you do this again." The queen stopped and looked at the king. "But you promised." The king looked at her in anguish. "I don't care. I can't take it anymore. I have watched 7 of my sons die. I will not let you kill this child." The queen smiled and said, "Very well, dear king. As per our agreement, I must now leave you. However, before I do, I will reveal to you my secret. I am Ganga, the river goddess. The 8 children born to you are 8 angels of heaven. They once offended a great sage. In retaliation, the sage cursed them to be born as human and suffer the pain and miseries of a human life. 7 of the angels repented and begged for mercy. Taking pity on them, the sage reduced his curse so that their lives as humans will be short-lived. The 8th angel, however, stood defiant, and as such, he was cursed to live a long and painful life in this mortal world. This is that 8th angel. I will take him with me to the heavens and train him so that he develops the skills and temperament to bear the burdens of the life ahead of him. I will return him to you when his training is complete." Ganga then vanished with the child. The The king stood for a long while at the river in shock, and then returned to the palace, deeply saddened. Chapter 3. The Eighth Son. Some years after the queen and his son left, Shantanu was walking along the river Ganga. He would often return to the river to reminisce about his lost queen and son, and think about the tragedy of his 7 sons that were drowned in the river. He had lived the previous years filled with great sadness. This time, he saw a boy playing with a bow and arrow near the river. Something about the teenager made him curious and drew him closer. As he approached the boy, Goddess Ganga emerged from the river. "Greetings, dear king. As per my promise, the time has come to return your son to you. He has completed his training. Over the years, I have taken him to many different realms and great teachers. He has learned the duties of kings and political science. He has been taught ancient religious scriptures, as well as mental and spiritual sciences. He has knowledge of the duties of priests, and has been trained in advanced warfare. He has also been gifted with celestial weapons from the king of the gods. I have named him Devavata." Ganga then looked at the boy. "Go to your father, my son, and bring him joy." Ganga then disappeared, her duties completed. Shantanu was overjoyed to have his son and heir back. Over the years, his son proved his wisdom and valor many times. He single-handedly defeated an invading army and was loved by all in the kingdom. Shantanu was immensely proud of his son, but he still missed Ganga and suffered from a lonely heart. Chapter 4. Bhishma. One day, King Shantanu saw a beautiful woman on the river Ganga. He was lonely for many years, and he longed for a companion. The woman, Satyavati, was the daughter of a fisherman king. Shantanu asked the king for her hand in marriage. The fisherman king was a shrewd negotiator. "I will allow the marriage, dear king, but only if my daughter's sons become the next in line for the throne." Shantanu was shocked at the request. "But Devavata is the crown prince of Hastinapur. I will not change this," replied Shantanu. "Then unfortunately, I cannot allow the marriage," said the fisherman king. Shantanu had blindly accepted conditions for marriage previously, and it had cost him his 7 sons. This time he would not be so reckless in matters of the heart. He refused the request and returned to his palace deeply saddened. Devavata noticed his father's sadness and inquired with the council as to the reason. When he found out about the woman his father had met, he went to the fisherman king to speak to him directly. "My father is in love with your daughter. Please allow the marriage," said Devavata. "As long as you are the crown prince, then my daughter's sons will have no chance at the throne," said the fisherman king. "Then I will give up my right as crown prince," said Devavata. "There is nothing I will not do to bring joy to my father." "But in the future, your sons will also have a claim to the throne," said the fisherman king, "and this will cause problems for my grandchildren." Devavata then took a solemn vow. "In that case, in addition to giving up my right to the throne, I will also promise to never marry and to remain celibate for all of my life." In response to Devavata's words, the heavens opened up and showered flowers upon him. He was given the name Bhishma, the one who took a terrible vow. With the consent of the fisherman king, Bhishma took Satyavati to his father on a chariot and informed his father about his promise. Shantanu was devastated upon hearing about the severity of his son's vow. Shantanu was granted the power to give his son a special gift in return for his action. Bhishma was granted the ability to choose the time and place of his death, effectively making him almost immortal. Shantanu and Satyavati soon married, and 2 sons were born. Chapter 5. The 3 Princesses. When King Shantanu passed on, as per their agreement, the sons he had with Satyavati became the next in line to the throne. Their firstborn son was appointed the new king of Hastinapur. However, the new king died in battle before he produced any heirs. Their second son was then appointed king. However, he was still a child, so Bhishma acted as his regent. When the king came of age, Satyavati and Bhishma decided to get him married so that he could produce heirs. The king of Kashi was having a groom choosing contest for his daughters. He had invited all the eligible kings and princes. However, due to a past dispute, the king of Hastinapur was not invited. Bhishma was insulted by the omission, and with the permission of Satyavati, went to Kashi to win the princesses for his brother. Bhishma gathered the 3 princesses into his chariot and challenged the suitors to win them back. The kings and princes gave chase, and a fierce battle ensued, but they were no match for Bhishma. He fended off their attacks easily. One suitor, however, King Shalva, remained in chase for the longest and fought the hardest, trying desperately to win back the princesses. Bhishma destroyed his carriage, leaving him humiliated, but spared his life. The 3 princesses, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, were brought to Hastinapur and offered to the king for marriage. The eldest princess, Amba, appealed to Satyavati. She was in love with Shalva, the king who pursued Bhishma the longest. On Satyavati's request, Bhishma allowed her to return to Shalva. However, in the years to come, Amba would play a pivotal part in the life of Bhishma. The 2 remaining princesses, Ambika and Ambalika, were married to the king. Sadly, the young king died of an illness before he could produce any heirs. Satyavati was troubled. The kingdom was left without any lineage. She appealed to Bhishma to take up the throne and to take his brother's wives as his own. "Mother," he replied, "you above all others know of my vow to never take the crown and to remain celibate all my life. I will not break this oath." Satyavati then thought of another solution to the problem they faced. She decided to reveal a secret that she had carried for many years. Chapter 6. VYASA. Before her marriage to Shantanu, Satyavati met a sage named Parasha. Their union created a son who they called VYASA. Like his father, VYASA was a great sage who had omniscient and spiritual powers. The kingdom needed an heir, and since Bhishma was bound by his oath to never take the crown and to remain celibate, Satyavati summoned VYASA to help with their predicament. VYASA had promised his mother that he would always be on hand to assist with any problems she may have. Satyavati explained the situation with the death of her son before he could produce heirs with his 2 queens. As the half-brother of the king, under the current circumstances, VYASA had the right to produce an heir to the kingdom with the queens. He agreed to perform the duties as required. Ambika was sent to VYASA's chambers, but VYASA appeared to her as an extremely hideous man. Ambika closed her eyes in horror all through the blessing ceremony. Afterward, VYASA said to his mother, Ambika would produce an heir that was healthy and powerful, but he would be blind from birth. Then, the second queen, Ambalika, was sent to VYASA's chambers. When Ambalika saw VYASA, she turned pale white in terror. After the process was complete, VYASA informed his mother, Ambika will have a valiant son, but he will be pale white in appearance. Unsatisfied with the situation, Satyavati instructed Ambika to return to VYASA's chambers to get blessed again. She was determined that they should be a normal, complete child with no handicaps. However, Ambika would not subject herself to VYASA again. She dressed her handmaiden in her clothes and sent the handmaiden to VYASA in her place. Unlike the 2 queens, the handmaiden performed her duties without fear and with detachment. After the blessing ceremony, VYASA said to her, "You will produce a son who will be wise, artful, diplomatic, and a man of great learning. He will free you of your life as a handmaiden." VYASA, his duties completed, then disappeared. The first son born to Ambika was named Dhritarashtra, and he was blind. The second son, born to Ambalika, was named Pandu, as he was pale white in color. The third, flawless son, born to the handmaiden, was named Vidura. When the boys came of age, Pandu was appointed as king, although he was the second son. Dhritarashtra was not thought capable since he was blind. Vidura was appointed prime minister. Dhritarashtra was arranged to marry the princess Gandhari of Ganda. When Gandhari learned her husband-to-be was blind, she chose to wear a blindfold from that day forth, so that she experienced the world as her husband did. Pandu was married to Princess Kunti of the Yadava dynasty. However, Bhishma motivated for Pandu to take a second wife from the Madhura kingdom. This would further strengthen the empire. So, Pandu took Princess Madhuri as his second wife. Kunti, like the queens before her, had a secret. One that in the years to come would shake the kingdom of Hastinapur to its very core. Chapter 7. Kunti. When Kunti was a young girl, her household was visited by a great sage. Kunti cared for the sage and tended to his every need. The sage was so impressed by her that before he left, he gifted her with a mystical mantra. When recited, this mantra would allow her to summon any celestial deity to bless her with a child. Kunti was curious to know if the mantra worked, and with childish abandon used the mantra to summon the sun god, Surya. As the sage promised, Surya appeared and gifted her with a child. The child glowed in the sun and had a golden chainmail across his chest. After the wonderment had subsided, Kunti found herself terrified. She was an unmarried young girl. She had no idea how to take care of a child, and frightened about what the elders may say. In a panic, Kunti placed the baby in a basket and sent it floating down the river Ganga, praying for a kind soul to find the baby and raise it as their own. Now, Kunti was the queen of Hastinapur, along with Madhuri, the king's second wife. When King Pandu returned from his mission of conquest, he took his two queens on a trip into the forest, leaving Dhritarashtra as the king in charge. One day, when Pandu was hunting in the forest, he shot his arrow into the bushes where he thought he spotted a deer. Unfortunately, his arrow hit a mystical rishi who was with his wife. With his dying breath, the rishi cursed Pandu that the moment he touched his wives with desire, he would instantly fall to his death. Pandu was devastated. He had not yet produced any heirs. He decided to remain in the forest and sent word that Dhritarashtra's duties as king would be extended. Pandu discussed their situation with Kunti, and she revealed to him the mantra that the guru had bequeathed her. Pandu was excited to hear this news and urged her to make use of the mantra to create their heirs. "Which deity should I invoke first, my lord?" asked Kunti. "Invoke Dharma, the god of justice," replied Pandu. "This will ensure that our oldest son will be blessed with righteousness." Kunti chanted the mantra, and Lord Dharma appeared and gifted her with a son. They named him Yudhishthira. Pandu wanted more children and asked her to invoke Vayu, the lord of the wind, so their second son would be mighty and powerful. After Kunti's mantra, Vayu gifted her with a son who they called Bhima. Pandu was ecstatic. For his third son, he wanted a child that would be the most glorious and potent among men. For this child, Kunti invoked Lord Indra, the king of the heavens, and Arjuna was born. Pandu then asked Kunti to teach the mantra to Madhuri so that she may also have children. Kunti agreed. Upon learning the mantra, Madhuri invoked the Ashvins, the twin deities. The twins gifted to her were named Nakula and Sahadeva. And the 5 children came to be known as the Pandavas. Meanwhile in Hastinapur, Gandhari learned of the children born to Kunti and Madhuri, and she desperately desired children of her own. Chapter 8 Gandhari. When Gandhari heard of the children that were born to Kunti and Madri, she desperately desired to have children of her own. It had been many years, but she had not fallen pregnant. As if in answer to her prayers, VYASA appeared in Hastinapur, desiring food and shelter. Gandhari cared for him herself, tending to his every need. VYASA was impressed by her devotion and asked her to name her reward. "I desire 100 strong sons," Gandhari declared. "And so, you shall have it," replied VYASA, and then disappeared. Gandhari fell pregnant shortly thereafter, but after 2 years of maternity, she had still not given birth. One day in frustration, she hit her stomach with a stick and immediately went into labor. Her handmaidens were horrified at the result. Gandhari had delivered a solid mass of flesh, like an iron ball, not a child. Heartbroken, Gandhari instructed them to get rid of it. Just then, VYASA appeared. "Stop," he commanded. "I will prepare what needs to be done." VYASA prepared 100 vats and broke up the mass of flesh into each of the jars. As he did this, Gandhari desired a daughter as well. Reading her mind, VYASA informed her that the last bit of flesh would produce her daughter. Sometime later, the first son emerged from the vat and wailed as his lungs filled with air. Outside Hastinapur, the wild animals all brayed in response. Violent winds and fierce fires broke out around the kingdom. This son was named Duryodhana. Shortly after him, his 99 other brothers emerged from their vats, and lastly, their sister, who was named Dushala. These children would come to be known as the Kauravas. Dhritarashtra was grateful to have heirs of his own, but Yudhishthira, the son of King Pandu, would be next in line to the throne, and not his son Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra's jealousy and resentment would fuel a rivalry that would lead to a shattering collision between the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, and the Kauravas in the years to come. Chapter 9 Return to Hastinapur. Pandu spent his time in the forest with his 2 wives, Kunti and Madri, as well as his 5 sons, in relative happiness. One day, however, he forgot the curse of the rishi, and, overcome with desire, he touched the arm of his wife Madri. The rishi's curse took effect, and Pandu instantly fell to his death. Madri, overcome with grief, took her own life in return. This left Kunti as the sole parent of the 5 Pandava brothers. Kunti decided to return the family to the palace of Hastinapur. They were welcomed back, but not all the family were happy to see them. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, was the crown prince, but Dhritarashtra desired this position for his eldest son, Duryodhana. Queen Gandhari's brother Shakuni sowed even more seeds of distrust between the Kauravas, the sons of Dhritarashtra, and the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. Nevertheless, the families achieved a relative harmony, and Bhishma set about training the princes in their royal duties and skills. A rivalry quickly heated up between Duryodhana and Bhim. Bhim was immensely strong and made a habit of wrestling the Kaurava brothers into submission, often humiliating them in the process. Arjuna, meanwhile, excelled in every field of warfare training. One day, the princes were playing in the field when their ball ended up at the bottom of a well. When Yudhishthira reached into the well, his ring slipped off and also fell in. An archer walking past saw the princes trying to retrieve the items. He collected some reeds from the area and shot the first reed into the ball. He then shot the following reeds into the end of the previous one, eventually forming a long chain which reached the top of the well. He then pulled out the ball. Then he removed an arrow from his quiver, spoke a mantra, and shot the arrow into the well. The arrow returned with the young prince's ring. The princes were overjoyed and urged the archer to return with them to the palace, so that they could introduce him to their granduncle Bhishma. The archer agreed, and behind his eyes there was a look of sadness, as well as a desire for revenge. Chapter 10. Drona. When Bhishma heard of the prince's encounter with a mysterious archer in the woods, he instantly knew that this must be the legendary archer Drona. Drona had been returning from a humiliating meeting with King Drupad when he had his chance encounter with the Kuru princes. When Drona was a young student, he was friends with Drupad. He had assisted Drupad on many occasions, and one day Drupad promised him that when he became king, he would share his kingdom with Drona. In the years since, Drona had fallen on hard times. He had a wife and a young child, and despite his great skill, he often battled to provide for them. Drona went to Panchala and met with King Drupad. He reminded Drupad of his childhood promise. King Drupad laughed him off. Kings can never be friends with poor wretches. One who is not a king can never have a king for a friend. Drupad and his court laughed Drona out of the palace. Drona was embarrassed, bitter, and infuriated. On his way home, he came across the princes, trying to get the ball out of the well. After demonstrating his archery skills, the princes eagerly introduced him to Bhishma. Bhishma appointed Drona as the guru for the princes. Drona eagerly accepted the position, and his financial woes had finally come to an end. Drona set about with earnest to train the princes in the art of weapons. Bhim and Duryodhana quickly showed skill at wielding the mace. Yudhishthir was an expert at using the spear. Nakula and Sahadev showed great skill with the sword. But Arjuna quickly became Drona's favorite student. One day, Drona set up a wooden bird in a tree and instructed the princes of their task to hit the eye of the bird. Before letting them fire, Drona asked each of the princes what they saw. "I see the bird, the branch, and the tree," said Yudhishthir. "No good," said Drona, and asked him to stand aside. The other princes had similar answers, until he came to Arjuna. "Tell me what you see," Drona asked Arjuna. "I see only the eye," replied Arjuna, and shot the arrow, which hit the eye of the wooden bird, dead on target. When the princes reached a certain level of skill, Drona asked for his Guru Dakshina, the payment given to the Guru by the student. "What is it you desire, master?" asked Arjuna. "Bring me King Drupad," replied Drona. The princes set off on their mission, and with their special abilities and the training of Drona, Drupad's guard proved no match for them. They had Drupad at Drona's feet by the next day. "A king, you had said, Drupad, can only have another king as a friend. I desired your friendship, so I strove for a kingdom and made it mine," said Drona. "But now you are no longer king, so I shall give you back half your kingdom. Now, King Drupad, we can remain friends if you wish." Drupad agreed to the conditions with a forced smile on his face. But he would remember this humiliation, and one day Drona and Drupad would find themselves on opposite sides of a great war. Thank you for watching so far. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're new here, please subscribe. This will ensure that more people can find this resource. Click the notification button so that you can be the first to know about new uploads. And please do comment below. I'll do my best to reply to any questions. Thank you.